Hey, what's up guys? So today I'm going to show you guys how you can make a masonry grid layout like this. You might have seen something like this on Pinterest before. I'm actually copying Unsplash kind of. I don't know if you guys have ever used Unsplash before. It's just kind of a free image website. But you see what I mean. They have like these images like this, little tags at the bottom. And that's essentially what we're doing with this. Traditionally, people have kind of done this for a long time with JavaScript, but you can do this with CSS now in a way that's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to show you guys how you can do that, kind of talk about the caveats between doing it with CSS and doing it with JavaScript, as well as we're going to use a thing called framer motion to do these shared animation transitions like this, which are pretty cool. For the stack for this, I guess probably should have said that first. We're going to be using React, the thing called Next.js. If you haven't used Next.js before, don't worry too much. There's not any specifics of Next.js. But yeah, so React with a thing called framer motion. Framer motion is the animation library we're going to be able to use to do these animations like this, as well as like these kind of like little hover animations and stuff. We're going to be using a thing called tailwind CSS with Daisy UI. Tailwind CSS is a like a CSS library, kind of like Bootstrap, only instead of getting all the little components, you kind of just get the styling. And then we're going to be using a thing called Daisy UI, which is essentially built on top of Tailwind CSS and just gives you some other utility functions for actually getting more like a traditional design library. So you're going to get buttons out of that. You're going to get, check marks, little avatars, stuff like that. We'll be using that for things like this header bar up here. So yeah, pretty straightforward. We can go ahead and get started. So all that I have right now, I'm not going to go through all the specific steps of setting this up, but I just went ahead and I followed, let me see, do I have the docs up? Let's see. Yeah, so I have the Tailwind CSS Next.js docs up right here. You can just look up install Tailwind CSS with Next.js, and this is going to show you how to create a new Next.js project. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can read a little better. But yeah, so this is going to show you how to make a project from scratch, install Tailwind. It's going to have you include some Tailwind stuff specific to Next.js for the content here. You're going to replace a couple of things and some global CSS stylings, and then you can go ahead and run your project and it should work. I've done a couple of other small things in here. So if you go into your pages directory, normally you'll have an API thing up here. I've removed that. I've removed the home stylings. And then if I go to index, which is what I have open right now, I've kind of removed a bunch of the stuff in here and just left it with just a div and this head tag like this. So fairly straightforward. You can leave some of that stuff in if you want, like the API. You don't have to get rid of it. I just like kind of starting with a blank slate. So yeah, that's kind of the start. We do have to install a couple of other dependencies. Let me copy this from my other guy over here. Let me go ahead and open my terminal back up. I am just open to my my project right here on my terminal. Can probably make that a little bit bigger as well. A little bigger than that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install Framer Motion and Daisy UI. So it's Framer-Motion and Daisy UI. Give that a install. I'm going to give this a minute. I'll come back whenever this is done. And there we go. So it looks like that's done. We do have to do a little bit more setup for Daisy UI. So I'll just go to the Daisy UI docs and we should be able to figure that out. So we click install. Yep, it just has this instructions up here. So npmi Daisy UI, and then we just have to import it in our tailwind config.js file. So that should have been added whenever you initialized your Tailwind project. So I'll open this up, come to plugins, and all I have to do is just paste that in. Oops, what did I do there? Extra bracket. Cool. So just paste that in. Click save, and then Daisy UI should be set up. I don't think we have to do anything else. We definitely don't have to do anything else for Framer Motion. I think the next thing after that is going to be, oh, okay, that's right. So we have set up our _document file. I'll show you why we want to do this. In Next.js, we have this file-based routing system. So if you go to your pages, if you've used this before, you probably understand how this works. But like, if I had a new file in here called banana.js and then exported a file from that, we would have a route called, our website /banana. Outside of that, though, go ahead and delete that so we don't actually have a banana route there. Click delete, move to trash. We also have these other kind of wrapper components. One of them that comes by default is this _app.js, which looks like this. You'll probably already have that there. But there's another one that we can use, which is this _document. And that's just going to give us access to like the head HTML tag for our website. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that. So _document.js. Go ahead and paste that guy in there. And the reason that I wanted to do this is because with Daisy UI, if I come over here and I click themes, we can add this thing that's like this theming up here. You can actually play around with this. If you go to the Daisy UI website, make this a little bigger, and click on this theme, you can get like light and dark mode like this, but they have a bunch of other color schemes just kind of by default. And this is going to give us an opportunity to just kind of play around with colors without having to, actually set any colors up ourselves. And you can switch through all of these. You can even, if you wanted to, switch through these kind of in real time to give users, an option to use whatever color scheme they want. For mine, I'm going to use this lo-fi one. I like just the black and white colors. You'll see like what I have over here. It's just black and white, very square edges on everything. But if you wanted to use one of the other ones, I'll show you a couple of the other ones. You can totally do that. So yeah, all I have to do is copy this data theme guy here, come to my document, go like this, click save, and we should have, I'll use Cupcake to start so you can kind of see how this works. Let's see, I'll open up iTerm, and then we'll just go npm run dev. Should get our project running over here. Give it 1 second. Let's go. Super exciting, I know. And there we go. Okay, so obviously nothing's in here right now. So I'll just give you an example. Let's just go to our index.js and delete all this other stuff. So index.js is a kind of just our home route. We'll just add a button in here for right now. We'll say hello world. I'm going to give this a class of btn, and we'll say btn, I think it's primary. And we should get a button on the page here. Yep, it's going to look like that. Go ahead and go up a couple. And now I'm just going to change this theme in here. So like I said, I like the lo-fi one. So once that saves, so you'll get like this black one like this. We could try something like, I think forest is a kind of cool one. Click save on that. Yeah, we get like this green with this kind of dark background. There's a whole bunch of these again. If you just go over to the Daisy UI docs, click themes over here, you can pick whichever one of these whichever one of these is good for you. The dark I like a lot, just like the normal light and dark. But like I said, for this, I'm just going to stick with lo-fi. Lo-fi. Click save, and yeah, that should be all of our setup for this. Go back out on this so it doesn't look ridiculous. Yeah, okay, so that's our setup. After this, we can go ahead and get started on actually coding some stuff. So I've just gone ahead and jumped back over to our index.js file. I've closed down that document file that I had open, and I'm gonna go ahead and remove that button that we added. Let's just save that. It should go away in a second. And the first thing that I'm going to add is just a nav bar, just so you guys can kind of see how Daisy UI works. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Like, there's not anything you really need to install. Let's just find the nav bar here. Just go Command F, nav bar. There we go. So you're going to see if you kind of look through these, they don't have, you can just click like HTML and JSX. And because we're using Tailwind, this is all just based off of classes. It's not like some component that we're going to import. So we can just find one of these that we like I liked this one. So I'm going to go ahead and click JSX since we're using React. And I'll just click the little copy here. Then I'm going to come over here, back over to my project, and I'm going to create a new folder that I'm going to call components. And I'll make a file in here called navbar.js. I have React snippet set up, so I can just type RFC, and then I should get something like this. And I'm just going to paste in that navbar code that I just had a second ago. There's going to be a couple other things I'm going to want to add in here in a second, but if we save that and then go take a look, I guess we actually need to use it. Sorry. So let's go ahead to our index file, and right under this head here, I'm just going to add in navbar. Should be able to import it like this. Click save. Give that just a second, and there we go. So now we have our navbar up here. So let's see, what did I actually want to add to this? The first thing that I wanted to add was, I guess, the sticky positioning. So we'll come back over here, and the first thing I'm going to do is just come up to our top guy up here. We'll go sticky. That's going to give us position sticky. We'll set top of 0, so it stays at the top, 0 rather. And we'll add a z-index of 40 because I want the modal to be z-index of 50, and I want to make sure that's on top of this. And I think that's all we're going to add to that as far as styling. I guess we could add a shadow if we want, so we can just go shadow, which should give us a small shadow. Maybe we'll do something like shadow LG. See what that looks like. Yeah, so now we've got a little shadow like this. I'm going to replace this little Daisy UI guy, which should be, let's see, where is that? Oh, yep, right here. So I'm going to replace that with something more that makes a little more sense. Do something like pics, I think is what I did for the example one. And then I want to actually add an icon. So what I did last time, you can install React icons and use them per usual. If you've never used this React icons package, it's just an NPM package with a whole bunch of icons in it. Instead of doing that though, I'm just going to go ahead and grab one of these straight as an SVG. So we'll find one we like. That one looks kind of cool. We can go to SVG here, right click, and then say copy as, or copy element rather. And then we'll just paste that right above this. We might have to change a couple of things here for React to not scream at us. Yeah, so like the stroke width, we'll probably have to change. Then we might want to make it a little bigger. It's 1M right now. Maybe we'll change it to 2M and just see what that looks like. So give that a save. Pop back over here, and there we go. So now we have this. What I guess I should probably also do, I don't really like that this is a button, so maybe we'll just remove the button classes. Maybe we just remove all this stuff from this and change that a little bit. So we're going to need a little bit of margin on the left. We can keep it as font, bold, and then maybe you want to do like text XL, something like that. See what that looks like. Yeah. Cool. Okay, I'm cool with that. So now we have a little bit of a nav bar up here. This is going to be sticky once we actually have some stuff, so we can kind of scroll down. It does have some other stuff in here if you want to play with it. You can play with some of the other classes too. So you could do like BG primary, something like that. I don't know. Oh, I already have it set over here, so I can remove that. Oh, it worked anyways. Sweet. So you could do like that, and you could like change the text color. If you want to play with this, feel free. But I'm just going to leave mine kind of standard like this for now. Now that we have that set up, what's the next thing we should do? Okay, cool. Yeah. So let's come back over to our index file here, and I'm going to go ahead and just define some of the state that we're going to need for this. Let me find my other project to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to import useState. So let's see, what do we actually want to call this? We'll say selected. The state that I'm defining here is just going to be the state for holding whichever image we're currently viewing in that modal that I showed you. So we're going to use state. We'll go ahead and import that. And we'll just set this as null to start. That should work fine. To make this make a little bit more sense, maybe we can just kind of wireframe out the other components and not actually add anything. So we're going to have two. Let me see what I called them in my last project. I think I called them like list, just list and modal, something like that. So we can come over to our components, click new file. We'll have a list.js. Make a component for that. We'll just say list, that's fine. And then another one called called modal.js. So I will do the same thing for that. And then we can go ahead and import these over in our index. We'll just do it right under navbar. Go like this, import that. Then we'll have another one for modal, which I'll also import. And what we're going to do is modal by default is obviously not going to be open, right? List is going to show all of the images. That's where most of the fun stuff is going to happen. And then in modal, whenever we actually click on one of the images in our list, we're going to set selected, and we're going to set that to whatever image we're looking at. And we're going to go ahead and open our modal with that image that is selected. So essentially what we want to do is pass down these props. Let me double check. Yeah, so for this first one, we just want to pass down set selected because we don't actually care what image is currently selected on that one. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so we'll just pass down set selected to this guy. We'll also pass down set selected to our modal, and we'll also want to know which one is selected in our modal because we're going to want to be able to show its data. So yeah, you'll see over here now we just kind of have our placeholders here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the stuff that's in modal for right now because we don't want that to explode. Maybe we can destructure these props. So in modal, we have these two props. Come over here. We can either just, add props and reference it as props.selected, or we can just add some brackets like this and destructure them out like this. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for list. So for list, I'm just passing in set selected. Go over to our list, open up some brackets like this, and there we go. So this is a good start, I think. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything else over here. Yeah, okay, so this is a good start. Let's jump into actually setting up the component for this list so that we can show the Masonry grid. So let's go ahead and set up this list component. The first thing we have to do before we actually set it up, I can go ahead and close this index now, and I'll close the modal as well, is actually get some data for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make a file called data.js. And I've actually got some data that I already set up. If you want to use the same data as me, you can just grab this off my GitHub. But what each of these are is just a URL that I grabbed from Unsplash, and then I've added a title, description, and some tags, which all of this is just lorem ipsum and just random stuff, as well as a unique ID. The only thing that you have to have, obviously, is a URL, as well as this unique ID. If you want to omit some of the other stuff, feel free. But we're going to need the unique ID in order to do the shared transition between the list and the modal. So now that we have that, we can pop back over to our list. Again, just grab that if you want from my GitHub, if you just want to use the same stuff that I'm using. And On top of our list component, I'm going to make another component called card. Whatever, so we'll say const card, and this is just going to be another component like this. And that, for right now, we'll just return just a blank div. I guess that's fine. We'll come back to this in a second, but this is going to be the card that actually has like the image in it and the little tags. And now we'll jump down to the actual list here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add some padding in this. This is going to take up this whole empty space here. So I want to have a little bit of padding on it just to give it some space on the inside of the viewport there. We'll say maybe padding 4. If you have the tailwind extension, by the way, you can actually hover over these and it'll show you how big it is. So this is 1 rem or 16 pixels in this case. You can make it bigger, smaller, whatever you want to do. This is not unbelievably important. Right under that, I'm going to add a title. We'll say an H1 or an H2, doesn't really matter. And this is going to say your images. Again, this is not super specific to this, but feel free to follow me if you so please. And for this, we'll just go ahead and say class, oops, we'll give it a class, oh my gosh, twice in a row. Ugh. A class name, and we'll say text center, so we get this in the center of the screen. We'll give it a font of bold. We'll give it a text size of 4XL. These go up to, to 4XL. These go up to 5XL. And we'll give it a margin bottom of 8. So this should pop up here in a second. There we go. So your images. Make this whatever you want. Not super important. This margin bottom is going to give us some space between this component and the div that's going to wrap the cards. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I actually dive into all the specifics of this is we'll just say a div like this, and then we're going to take that data that we had. So just click data, not from auto prefixer, from // data. I think that's how I exported it. Let's check. It might just be a default export. I'm calling it items. Sorry, not data. So items from data. We'll say items.map. So for each item, we will return a card, is what we're calling them here. And that card, so we're going to need a key because we're doing a map in React, and you always need a key, which we can just use item.id. Then we're going to need to pass in set selected, which we should be getting through props here, set selected. And we're also going to need to pass in the actual item. So we'll just say item is equal to item, single. So we'll take all of these and we will destructure them, or these two rather, these two, and we'll destructure them off of our card up here. So we need set selected as well as this item. Before I add any other stylings or anything, we'll just say item dot, what did I call it? Title, something like that, and see what that does for us. Yep, there we go. So we have all of our titles here. So now we can actually set up some of the stylings here. So before I actually get into the kind of grid stuff, so like actually making a grid, let's just get the actual image stuff on there, and then we'll go back and explain exactly how you can make the Masonry grid. So for the first thing that I need to do here on this div, I can go ahead and remove our title here. On our div, we can actually leave this styling as is for right now. This is where we'll do some of the grid stuff. But inside of this, I'm going to need an image. So we'll say, we'll start with just image, that's fine. And we'll say source is equal to item.url, I believe is what I called it. Go ahead and save that, see what that looks like. I need to give it a width and everything. Okay, cool. So now we've got some images in here, not sized or anything. What we actually want to do instead, though, is use framer motion, which we added, because I want, whenever I hover over one of these images, for it to kind of give me like a little bounce effect, and then maybe when I click on it, it will like kind of bounce in a little bit. So all that we have to do for that is instead of use image like this, we're going to do motion.image. And motion we will import from framer motion. This doesn't want to do it for me like that. So let's see, make sure I do this right. Import motion from framer motion. So this shouldn't change anything immediately because we're not using any framer specific stuff. So if I hover these, nothing's going to happen just yet. But what framer does is it just gives you access to like any normal HTML tag like this, prepended with motion, and then that gives you access to some other kind of like declarative animations that you can do. So for instance, I want one that is going to happen on hover. All these do is they take in an object like this, like kind of like a normal style object in React, And we'll add a couple of things here. So I want to scale it up a little bit. So we'll say scale 1.025 is what I did last time. If you want it to be, super big, feel free to go bigger. I just want something kind of subtle. And then you can add transition like this. Oops. Transition. And in this transition object, you can actually add like the duration. So like how long should it take to go from, scale of 1 to scale of 1.025. I'm going to say duration, we'll give it 0.2 seconds, something like that. If I save that, we should now get, once it updates, super exciting. What do we got going on here? There we go, just had to refresh. So now you'll see we get like this little animation whenever we hover, and we didn't have to do anything besides just kind of pass in that object like that. Beyond this, I want to also add a on tap, or while tap rather. This will just give a little bit of extra feedback to the user whenever they go to open the modal. So we'll say while tap, I want to do a scale of, what did I do? 0.95. I believe that's what I did last time. Let's see if this actually refreshes for me this time. Nope, love that. Refresh, try that again. There we go. So now you see whenever I tap, click, 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 you kind of get a little bit smaller. What we're going to do as well is add an on-click handler to this. I'm passing in this set selected as we remember earlier, and I'm just setting it equal to this item. So if you remember back to whenever we set up our use state, we just defaulted it as null. What we're going to end up doing inside of our modal component, where we're passing in the selected object here, we're going to say if it's null, then we don't want to show the modal. But if it has some data in it, which is, whenever we click on it like this, then we're going to let the modal kind of pop up and show whatever data we're passing to it. In this case, whichever image we're mapping over at this time. Beyond this, that is pretty much it besides some classes we're going to add. There is one more thing for the shared layout transition that I'm going to add to this, but I'm going to come back to that later. When we actually get the modal, so you can see the difference between the modal just kind of popping up abruptly and the modal actually transitioning. So as far as actual classes, I'm gonna actually put this below source. So we'll say class name, and we'll give this a width of full. We'll give it a background of base 100 whenever it is actually kind of loading. We'll give it a, let's see, what else did I add? Say shadow XL, so it pops out a little bit. Image full, we'll give it a cursor of pointer. Sorry about that. And I believe that is it. So give that a save. We should get a little bit of a shadow on the sides now. I don't know why this hot refresh isn't working as it's supposed to. Cool. So yeah, that's totally fine for right now. So I'm going to go ahead under that. And then all we need after this is to add those little tags that I had under it last time. So go ahead and add another div like this. This div just needs a class name of flex, which is going to give you display flex. We'll say flex wrap, and we'll do a margin top of 2 to give us a little bit of space between these tags and the image above it, right? What we're going to use for these, if I go to Daisy UI, is just these little Daisy UI badge components. Oh, it's actually right there. So these are super straightforward. Go ahead down to one of these. You can just copy them from here. It's just literally badge like this. So all that I have to do now is go to our item.tags, I believe is what I called it, tags, and then we'll map over all of those. So then we'll say for each tag, we want to return a div, /div. This div is going to have a key of tag because it's just some text. It's totally fine. Go ahead and save that and just see what that looks like to start without any of the styling or anything. Give that another shot. Oh, what do we got going on here? One moment. Okay, so we have our tags, item.tags.map, key tag. Oh, it helps when you actually add some text in it, I suppose. Go ahead and say tag. There we go. Cool. While that reloads, we'll just go ahead and add the classes. Yep, there we go. So now we have our tags down here. That blew me away for a second. So now the next thing that we need is to actually add that badge styling. So if I come over and look at what we had again, all that you need to add is a class name of badge to actually get that basic styling. Say class name badge. And this should just give us kind of a black badge in this case. Yep, there we go. Oops. Have our black badges like this. I kind of want to make it like a dark grayish or something. So we'll go with BG base 300 is the color that I liked. That's also going to leave a black border. So we'll say border none to remove the border that's on the outside. We will say text zinc 600 is the one that I liked. You could also just do like text black 70 or something like that. But for this looked good to me. We'll add a little bit of margin on the right to give us some space between each of the separate tags, as well as some margin on the bottom. So margin bottom 1, go ahead and give that a save. And once this reloads, we should have just a little bit of space, and they're gray. Awesome. So that looks like good to me. So now what we actually need to do is set up the columns. So the first thing I'm going to do to set up these columns is to scroll back down to my list component here. And I'm going to go to this div that's wrapping our item map here. I'm going to go ahead and add a class name to this guy. And we're going to start just by using these columns like this. I'm actually going to show you the CSS for columns. So a lot of people probably haven't used this before, but CSS actually has this feature that's just columns. And what this will do is it'll split all of the children up just into separate columns. So you'll see if you go to this Mozilla MDN docs here, it's currently on columns 2, and the child is just some text. If I click 3, it's going to split into 3 separate chunks like this. And this is perfect for us because we can do this and then set the inner children to inline block, and it will automatically give us this kind of masonry layout that we're looking like. There are a couple of little things that we're going to want to change, but I'm going to go ahead and just add that in now, and we'll play with it and see how it works. So we'll say columns 2 to start, and then you can pass in a gap. We'll say 4 for this, and this is just going to be the difference in the gap. I'll actually save that and show you the difference whenever this loads. So yeah, now we have like a little bit of a thing like this. If I changed gap to 8, for instance, you're going to see that the gap between the images is just going to get a little bit bigger. And this is perfect, exactly what we want. So I'm going to go back to 4. What I also want to do, I don't want this to just stay as a gap of 2. Also, ignore these kind of tags at the top here. We'll get back to why that's happening in a moment. But for right now, what I want to do is to make this responsive. So I don't just want it to stay at 2 columns. I want it to get more columns as it gets bigger. And this is super, super easy with Tailwind. You don't even need to set up media queries or anything. So what I can just do is prepend anything with a size. Like there's a set of Tailwind sizes like MD, LG, XL, SM, a couple of other ones. And for medium, we'll change columns to 3. So just save that. Let that reload. And now you'll see we have 3. Then once we get a little bit smaller, we're going to go back to 2 columns. Super, super straightforward. I'm going to do the same thing again for when it's a little bit larger. So I'm actually going to add it XL because large is actually pretty close to medium. And we'll say at that point, go to 4 columns. Let that save. This a little bit bigger. And now we have a responsive grid all the way from small all the way up to large like this. So if I go really small, 2 columns, really big, 4 columns. Beautiful. So now let's go back and kind of fix this weird little wrapping issue that we're having. All that we have to do for this is come on up to our card class up here, and where I left this div kind of empty, I'm going to go ahead and add a class name of inline block. Then we'll add a width of full, and we'll add a margin bottom of 4. That's also going to give us a little bit of space below them. And adding this inline block property here is going to make sure that all these tags and these images kind of stay grouped together, and we don't have that weird wrapping problem. And this simple little setup is going to give us essentially what we're looking at here, or essentially what we're going for here. It's going to give us like this Pinterest-esque responsive masonry grid layout like this. One thing you will notice, though, you might not have noticed since I did this super quickly, is that these actually aren't in order, which is unfortunate. So like if I go ahead and I come back down here and I remove our columns and our gap, I'll just go like this, click save. And if we just go ahead and reference, actually the first one stayed in the same spot. So let's go 1 to say this third one. Let's see where this third one shows up. This should, or is the third one, second one? Yeah, it's the third, or okay, second one. Yeah, okay, cool. So like the third one's all the way down here. This is the one unfortunate part about doing this using this columns method. Traditionally, people have solved this as using JavaScript. There's also ways of doing this with a normal CSS grid that will keep it in order. It's a little bit more in depth. I did bookmark some places you can look for this, though. Let me save this, or let me open this up. Okay, yeah, so I have over here, this is kind of the basic CSS masonry, a good document that you can look at for this basic CSS masonry layout. This is essentially how I'm doing it. If you wanted to check a little bit more in depth how how I'm doing it with a little bit further explanation and some specifics, check out this doc. It's super great. But linked inside of this doc is also this other grid doc, which is going to give you everything you would need if you wanted to do this using grid. I'll scroll down, but you'll see that there's a bunch of CSS and extra JavaScript required to do this correctly, which is a little bit out of scope for this. And I kind of like the kind of smooth trick of just doing this with a couple of lines of CSS. The other thing you could do, of course, is to just use a package. So let me find the one that I liked. I think it was, let's see, what did I call it? I think it's this guy. Yeah, here we go. So let me paste this over here. I played around with this. Oops, I pasted that in the wrong spot. I played around with this React responsive Masonry package. It's not unbelievably huge. You'll see 13,000 monthly downloads. It seems like it's well enough maintained, but this is a very, very simple component. So if you wanted to have something that kept your order from left to right, you could, instead of doing this columns layout, you could do just wrap it with the components that are given to you from this React responsive Masonry component, and that'll make this super, super straightforward for you. But yeah, okay, so I think that is pretty much it as far as the Masonry layout goes. I think we can go ahead and set up the modal and the transitions now. So let's jump over to that. All right, so now that we've got our grid set up, we can go ahead and set up our modal and set up the transitions here. One thing I want to just remind you of really quick is that we have this on click here setting the item, and that is being passed up to our index.js file, which is right here, which is being defaulted as null. Essentially what we're going to do in our modal component is we're going to check to see if selected is null, and if it is null, we're not going to show the modal. But if it has a value, we'll actually show the modal. If you wanted to have like a toggle switch that was just a Boolean, that might make a little bit more sense, but just for simplicity's sake, we're going to go ahead and just do it the way that I'm doing it here. So if we go ahead and drill into our modal, we'll go ahead and do that kind of first thing that I was talking about. So we're taking in selected and set selected. And the first thing I'm going to do is just say if not selected, we will go ahead and just return, say, some empty fragments like this. Before I actually go ahead and do all of the modal contents, we can set up just kind of the backdrop, like the black backdrop rather. This we want to be able to click on so that we can close the modal. And I'm just going to have it like a 50% opacity black color. So we'll just go ahead and say class name. The first thing we want to do is fixed, so that this is fixed to the screen. We'll say inset of 0. The inset of 0 is essentially, if you've never used inset 0 before, it's going to give us top, right, bottom, and left, all of 0 pixels, which is just going to make this fill up the whole screen. We'll give it a background of black and say 50% opacity. So you could just do over whatever number here. So I could say 70% opacity if I wanted. We'll just go with 50 using Tailwind. I'll say z index of 50 so that this sits on top of our header bar here, which is a z index of 40. And then I want to do simply cursor pointer so that the user has the experience of understanding that they'll be able to click on this in order to close the modal. And then finally, just overflow y scroll. Oops, scroll. Sweet. So if I go ahead and save that, this should actually work for opening this. Okay, yeah, so we can see it's open. Ignore kind of this gutter that we have over here. This is because of our overflow scroll. What we could do if we really wanted to kind of flesh out this modal all the way is to add some styling to remove this inner scroll bar, or you can leave it. There's a couple of ways that you can deal with this, but in this case, I'm just not going to worry about it. Like you'll even be able to see if I turn off my mouse and just go to my MacBook, you'll see that goes away. But we're just going to ignore that for right now. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So now that we've got that, what we want to be able to do is click this. You'll see right now I can click it, but nothing happens. So all we have to do is add an onClick to this div, set that equal to a function like this. And all we want to do is say set selected back to null. So if I save that, I should now be able to click this and open. If I click on any of these images, it should open. If I click anywhere else now, it should close. So sweet, that's pretty much our first step. Now we can get to actually adding in the inner div. So this inner div is going to hold both that image and the text that's going to be below it. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a div like this. This is going to be, I don't want clicking on the image or clicking on the text under the image to actually close the image. So what we're going to do is add an onClick to this. This is going to take in the event, and I'm going to call event.stopPropagation. Essentially what this does is it just stops the event from bubbling up. So there's in a minute going to be, the image here. And if I click on the image, I don't want it to close like that. I only want it to close if I click on the black background on the side. And that's what this event.stopPropagation is going to do for us. If I go under that, I need to add some class names. So for these class names, I want a width, equal to this. I want a width of full. Whenever we're on a small screen, I want it to be full width of the screen. We'll say max width. And what you can do with Tailwind is you can, if one of these values isn't actually what you want, you can add square brackets like this and give it an actual value. So we'll say 700 pixels. That should be a pretty big image. This is going to need a margin X of auto. That's going to make sure the image and the content stays in the middle of the screen. We'll give it a margin Y, so top and bottom, of 8. We'll give it a padding of X of 8 so that whenever you're on smaller screens, even though width is full, you'll still have a little bit of space for the backdrop on the sides. And then we'll also just give it a cursor of default, so that the user doesn't think that they can click on this as well to open or to close the modal, which we shouldn't actually be able to see anything now because there's no content in this, but that is kind of the beginning of what we want here. Inside of this, we'll just go ahead and start by adding our image. So I'm gonna actually wrap it in a div, wrap it in a div, and you'll see why we do this in a minute. This is gonna be for the shared layout animation, but for right now, we're not gonna do the shared layout animation. We're just gonna add the div, then we're gonna say image, and we're gonna give it a source equal to selected.url. If I save that, we should get our image here. Beautiful. So if I click on any of these other ones, we get our image in the middle here. We can scroll up and down, and it's just going to go kind of quickly back and forth between the different images. Below this, I have some text that I'm showing under this, and I am going to add an animation for this. What you're going to be able to imagine is that whenever we click this, we're going to get a smooth animation between the image being placed here and here. Then we're going to have some text down here below it. And if that text is kind of just jolting into place, but this is doing a transition, it's going to look a little bit weird. So we're going to add some transitions for that. For that, we're going to need motion again. So I'm going to go ahead and import motion from Framer Motion. And then below our image here, I'm going to go ahead and add not below our image, below the div actually, we're going to go ahead and add a motion.div. This motion.div is going to take in a couple of props. So the first one is initial. Initial kind of looks pretty similar to what you already saw earlier. It's just going to take an object, and this object is going to specify the initial state whenever this component first loads. So for instance, in this case, I want it to start with an opacity of 0, and I want it to start with a Y coordinate of 50 pixels. So it's going to start 50 pixels down with an opacity of 0. What you'll do to actually specify where it should go to is to add an animate prop. So we want it to animate from opacity 0 to opacity 1 and animate from a Y of 50 to a Y of 0. If I save that again, you're not going to see anything yet because there's nothing under here. So let's actually add some stuff under here. What do we actually want to add? Let's see. So we'll start by just adding, that's the other thing. We can add a transition property. Earlier you saw this kind of in the object. In this case, we're going to add a separate transition prop like this. And we're going to say a duration of 0.5 seconds is what I found was good for this. Now we can add some classes. So we're going to have a white background. So we'll just say background white. And we're going to say padding of 4. So this should give us a little white box here. Cool. So you'll probably start to be able to see the little animation that we got there like that. You see it kind of goes up and goes from opacity 0 to opacity 1. So it looks pretty good. Now all we need to do is just add some of that content in there. So I'm going to start by adding an H3. Inside of this H3, we're going to have our selected.title. I can save that, let that reload. While that reloads, we'll add some classes. So for this, I had text to XL. I had a font of bold, and I had a margin bottom of 2. If I go ahead and save that. Nice. I said bold. Now it's nice. Cool. Below that, we'll have our tags. So I'm actually just going to copy paste the tags from where we used them earlier. So if we go back to list, it's item.tags, which we'll just kind of rename that. But we can pretty much just copy paste this whole thing here. Actually, I don't even think we need all of it. I think we can just go like this, copy paste this, go under our H3, paste that in, and give that a save, see what that looks like. Oh, it's not item.tags, so that's going to explode. So we actually want selected.tags. Try that again. Open it up. Nice. Now we have our tags here as well. Below our tags, we'll go ahead and add our description. So that's just a paragraph tag, not an O tag, a paragraph tag rather. We will add in our selected.description. Save that, make sure I didn't have any typos. Should pop up. Nice, popped up. So now we'll say class name. And for the class name, we'll give it, let's say, just a margin Y of 4. I'm actually fine with how this looks by default. This is going to give it some margin both on the top and the bottom. And then below this, I'm going to add in a button, which is just going to be kind of like a fake download button. I'm not actually going to make this work for right now, but if you want to do that, go for it. So let's say download. We'll give this a class name equal to BTN. We'll do BTN primary, which with the theme that I'm using is just going to make it black no matter what, if it's primary or secondary. But if you're using a different theme, that'll probably give you a nicer color. And then we'll say BTN block, which is just going to make the button take up the full width. And now we should have a layout that looks something like this. Nice. So a little button. If you wanted to set that up, feel free. But now we should have a little animation for that little bottom piece. And all we're missing is our image animation here. So this piece, funny enough, for as complicated as it sounds, making an image animate between here and here is probably just about the easiest thing that you can do with Framer Motion. It used to be a little bit more complicated, but they actually recently made this very, very straightforward. So all that I have to do is have a matching layout ID is what the prop is called. You can add this layout ID to anything any motion component. And if two layout IDs are matching between two different layouts, so this is one layout, this is another layout, it will transition this image between each of those kind of layout ID elements. So for this, we'll just go ahead and do something like this. I'm going to add this in a template literals like this. And I'm going to say card dash, and we'll call it selected.id. So this is why we needed to make sure we had a unique ID for this. So selected ID. By default, this isn't going to do anything because it's not matching to anything yet, right? So if I click this, you're not going to see any cool animations yet. What we need to do though, is go ahead back over to our list component. And where did we want to add this? I believe we wanted to add this just directly to the image. Let me double check and make sure I'm right on that. Yep, okay, so directly on the image. So all we have to do is take that same ID and paste it to this motion component inside of our list. So if I go ahead down here, you can add this wherever you want. Go ahead and save that. We should now get a cool transition if I refresh, and it doesn't take a million years. Oops. I'm putting it on the wrong spot. That was kind of cool though. Let's try that again. So back over in our modal, I was not putting that on the wrong place. So I do not want this on this motion.div. I want to change this div, which is wrapping our image up here, to motion.div. This way you're actually animating between two images. That was actually kind of cool to see that do that with this other thing though. But let's give that a shot again. There we go. Nice, beautiful. So now if I click on any of these images, no matter what size it is, you're going to see that it takes the image from down here and replaces it up here with where it should go. This works with the bigger images. It's going to actually look kind of cool. You can scroll down like this, pop it up like this, and you get this duplicate kind of, or not duplicate animation, but this in-sync animation between this bottom piece coming up like this and the image being replaced up where it needs to go. If we go down to small screens, this works as well. So if I click on any of these, looks very, very nice. Go further, try another big one. Awesome. So yeah, this is literally as simple as it can possibly be. These layout animations can really add a nice kind of touch of professionalism to any kind of image gallery or anything that you have, any page transitions. And they look super, super, super cool. Anyways, that's it for this one, guys. I have all of the source code for this on GitHub. Sorry if you were waiting through all of this just for the shared animation thing at the end, because it's super, super easy. You can show it in about 15 seconds. But yeah, I hope this was useful for you guys. Check it out on GitHub. Follow me there. That would be super appreciated. And yeah, see you next time. Peace.